Our first guests are siblings and co-founders of Anthropic, an AI research lab that combines machine learning, neuroscience, and cognitive science. Everyone, please join me in welcoming to the stage Dario and Daniela Amodei. All right, thank you guys. It's so exciting to have you here. I mean, first, perhaps for the uninitiated who may have heard about ChatGPT or the results that Google serves up in Google search results or Microsoft Copilot, tell us about Claude and how it's different from the wave of large language models or chatbots that have emerged over the last year.
Yeah, so if we go back to kind of the founding of Anthropic, you know, right when a group of us left OpenAI to start Anthropic, we had two real theses. And one of those theses is something that I think is shared among the 3, 4, 5 companies that have been very successful in this space, and one was very unique to Anthropic. The first one was what's come to be called the scaling hypothesis, which is the idea that if you scale these models up a huge amount, then you add more data, you add more compute and parameters to the model, they perform better and better on a wide range of tasks. We were early advocates of that, but that I think is common to all of the companies. The second was that along with scaling these models up, making them like a very powerful rocket ship, you need to steer the rocket ship. And so we've worked on various things like constitutional AI, which is a method for explicitly specifying the values of an AI system, interpretability, which is looking inside an AI system, a bunch of things around AI security and resistance to jailbreaks. And so I really think of our work as the combination of the pure scaling up with this sort of steering and safety component.
I guess, let me ask you to answer that question too, because if you're going to distill it down for consumers who now can download a Claude iOS app, or enterprise users who have access to your APIs on Amazon's cloud or Google's cloud, but they have other options. So why Anthropic?
So really, I think there's a few reasons. The first is that today, Claude 3 Opus, which is our large model, is the most powerful, capable AI model available anywhere in the world today. And so for businesses that are really looking to transform some of the work that they do, particularly highly complex cognitive tasks, Claude 3 Opus is a great choice. Another reason is we really provide enterprise choice and sort of business choice. And the reason that we do that is we heard this feedback from our customers. Sometimes you need really the kind of, the Ferrari, like the best sort of fastest, smartest model available. But sometimes you actually just need a model that is, cheaper, quicker. Claude 3 Haiku, which is our smallest model, is a great choice for businesses that are using an LLM for something like customer support, right? Something where you need a really, really fast model that is, price competitive. And I think more broadly, something we found is that businesses in particular, but also consumers, really vibe, I think, with our approach around trustworthiness and safety and reliability of these models. Ultimately, when you're using a tool like Claude for so many different facets of your work, you really have to feel confident that what it's returning is something that is accurate, reliable, isn't going to go off script. And I think Anthropic has really been known for prioritizing that type of work.
Dario, chatbots, as we're experiencing them now as consumers, do you think that's a novelty, like the first demonstration of this novel technology? And does it go away? Does it sort of fade into the background of the tools that we end up using?
I think actually sort of both. So I think there's two directions the technology is going to take. I think one direction is that AI systems, potentially through APIs, and this is more the enterprise side of things, are going to start suffusing all of kind of our existing technological infrastructure in the world. So you can see the beginnings of it with kind of, integrating models into, for example, IDEs or code completion. You look at what Intuit has done with, kind of answering questions about TurboTax, extending products with AI systems and large language models. I think there's going to be a lot of that. A second thing that I think is going to happen is that the chatbot is also going to be extended by kind of reaching into a lot of the tools and being able to do things for you, right? This is the personal assistant that takes actions, that interacts with all the stack of existing technology for you. So I think both of those things will exist. They may correspond roughly to enterprise and consumer, or it may be a little bit more blurry than that. We, of course, are more focused on the enterprise, but really we deploy AI in every surface we can find.
I have a suspicion that next week at Google's event, Google I/O, and next month at Apple's event, WWDC, we're going to hear a lot from those companies about integrating AI into their software, into their operating systems. I'm curious, like, what kind of lane exists for the kind of third-party app like the Claude app that you just introduced on iOS?
So I don't know. I think our general perspective is it takes a lot of effort and a lot of resources to build a model. And I think once having built that model, we want to deploy it on every possible surface that we can. And we find a lot of folks find it, useful to use the model on mobile just as they use it on web. One thing I would also hint at that we've kind of started to move towards is, we recently released a Teams product, and of course, that's going to be on mobile as well. And the direction we're going in that is towards a more enterprise direction. If we think of the current chatbots, when people try and deploy the current chatbots in an enterprise setting, it's a bit like I took a human off the street, a smart human, and then kind of asked them to work with a coworker at a particular company, right? They don't necessarily have all the context. So I think we're working in the direction of trying to make it more like an informed employee, hooking it up to databases, hooking it up to company-specific information, and I think the mobile app is going to be part of that in addition to having a consumer experience.
So you and your co-founders are known as the team that spun out of OpenAI to develop models that are aligned with humanity, that don't develop unforeseen risks, that are safe. How did you come to develop your kind of concerns about the potential direction of AI?
So I think something that has always been this founding principle for us is, we see an incredible amount of potential benefit from this technology, right? Something that Dario and I talk about a lot, together with the company, with our co-founders, is this technology to transform sectors like healthcare, right? Or even science. I think some customers that have worked with us, Pfizer, the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, right? The type of work that they're doing is truly amazing, and we're proud to be able to support businesses like that. I also think we have felt very strongly that there are some lessons to be learned from kind of prior, technological waves or innovation. And this is not that, we're so incredibly prescient. We've just had several decades now of time to kind of look back on things like social media and say, wow, there was a lot of good that came out of this, but there were also a lot of harms that were kind of caused by this technology. Whether or not you could have anticipated those in advance, hard to say, but I think we are trying to be the most responsible actors that we can be. And think about what are the potential externalities that could be caused kind of accidentally by this tech. And we really try and take a very broad approach to how we think about that. Of course, we don't have all the answers. We try to be humble, but we've tried very, very hard to sort of think about what are the areas where something kind of could go wrong here, and how do we act as responsible leaders in this space.
Dario, I don't know if you caught the introductory video before we came up on stage, but there was a little clip of Emily last year at this conference asking Sam Altman with kind of wonderful simplicity, why should we trust you? And after a beat, he goes, you shouldn't. And so I want to ask you the same question. Why should we trust you?
Yeah, I mean, my view has always been you shouldn't trust people, you should trust institutions. And I think my view is, on one hand, we've tried to build an institution and a reputation that's trustworthy both in a societal sense and in a companies can trust us with their data sense. I think in the end, the proof is just in the pudding, right? You have to develop a reputation of doing what you say and saying what you do, and Anthropic hasn't been around for that long, but that's what we've tried to develop over time. I think there are broader societal questions about if the technology becomes truly powerful, to to a level that, that we haven't seen in a century or so, then we start to ask questions about kind of democratic legitimacy. It's not so much about trust, it's about, is this so big that, there needs to be some democratic mandate and involvement of the government. I don't think we've reached those questions yet, but I suspect they're closer than we think, and we should think about mechanisms of democratic accountability.
You guys have raised over $7 billion, in part from Amazon and Google, helping to accelerate this AI arms race. I guess I wonder, is the world safer now than it was 3 years ago before we started down this path?
I think something that is very kind of challenging about a field like AI is just, in some ways, the genie is out of the bottle, right? I think something that is, we think about a lot is, how do we, in the kind of environment that we're in, right? In the circumstances that sort of everyone is experiencing, where AI is taking off, right? How do we act as kind of the best, most responsible actors we can? And I think we have this sort of vision of not just, Anthropic and the decisions, we make impacting the technology we develop, but how can we put sort of positive pressure on the ecosystem, right? Something that we hear from our customers a lot, which we like to hear, is, hey, we're choosing Anthropic, we're choosing Claude because of your commitment to, safety and security and reliability. Because we also know that is what they're saying to our competitors, right? They're saying, hey, we don't feel confident that your models are as safe as Anthropic's. That's actually a great market signal, right? I think that there is a way in which we view our impact not just from the work that we do directly, but really from how we impact the market, policy, right? We try as much as possible to be very open about trends we're seeing so that policymakers can be informed about how to set thoughtful regulation in the AI industry.
I would add, we have this notion called the race to the top, right? So what you're referring to with, all these different players, you might call a race to the bottom, and I think that's real. But we often try to counteract that with a race to the top, which is we try to set a good example and get others to follow it. And in order to set that good example, we do have to have enough weight that others actually respond to our signal and get moved by our signal. An example of this is, we pioneered this concept of a responsible scaling plan. We put this out last September, and within a few months, OpenAI put out a similar thing. It really seemed to us that us putting ours out helped to spur the efforts by others. Now we've heard that Google is doing the same thing on podcasts, and I've heard similar, at least whisperings of other companies doing the same thing. I think in areas like interpretability, we developed the notion of constitutional AI, and I think just yesterday one of our competitors put out a concept very similar to it.
You guys clearly left OpenAI in part because of some concerns, right, about the direction of the company and whether your values were aligned. Are any of the fears that you had back then now being manifested by what you're seeing at OpenAI?
I think what I would say here is Anthropic really has always aimed to have, kind of our own vision and our own story, right? We saw this opportunity to go out and really build something where everybody was kind of aligned from the start about what our values were. We've always had this very strong kind of moral compass around wanting to develop these tools in a way that is, responsible and safe and reliable, right? All the words I've been using. And I think that it just sort of felt to us like this was the best way to do it, right? We had this opportunity to go off on our own and really sort of set this vision from day one.
That was a very civil response. Dario, is there anything that you want to add?
I mean, I don't know. I would just add the notion of trust. Like we have seven co-founders, 3.5 years later, all of us are still at the company. We have an incredible amount of, trust for each other. We started this company because we believed that we all had the same values and we trusted each other.
I want to run a poll. What is the most urgent issue raised by AI? And you're going to have some options, so please weigh in. I would love to know what you all think. And while we wait for results, I feel like I have an opportunity here talking to you both, your brother and sister, on stage at the same time. Danielle, what is it like starting a company with your brother? I mean, if it was my brothers, we would, we'd be probably in court, or at least there'd be a struggle for control. So how are you guys managing to do it?
I think something that is a little unusual about us is Dario and I have always been really close. We grew up in San Francisco. It's like a fun fact about us. We actually grew up like 10 minutes away
In
from
the
here.
Mission.
In the Mission, that's right. And I think I don't know, Dario and I, it's just sort of hard to explain, right? Like folks who knew us when we were little to folks that, know us now, right, our co-founders, they've always kind of described this like very strong, special bond between us. And I think since we were really little kids, we always had this desire to like make things better. I mean, I know that sort of sounds like a little corny or basic, but it was a very deep thing. Like we really felt like the world, there's many problems in the world. We really want to try and help and make things go better. I think getting to do that together, like in a company that we lead, is the sort of fullest expression of form that we've been able to do. And I don't know, it's great.
I mean, maybe how I would encapsulate it is I remember when Daniela was in high school, and every week we'd play the original Final Fantasy VII on the original PlayStation in 1997 or something like that. And now we do the same thing every week. Playing the new remake on the PS5 with 30 years better graphics, and it's basically the same thing except we're running this company.
And was there anything about the circumstances of your upbringing or the family dynamic, do you think, that pushed you to become entrepreneurs?
I'm curious for Dario's answer too, but I think something I think about a lot is, I don't think we recognized it at the time, but growing up in SF in the 90s, we really saw the sort of first tech boom up close, right? We didn't have the language yet for sort of what was happening, and of course a lot was sort of going on down the peninsula, but I vividly remember walking around and sort of seeing all of these very well-dressed young people going into these kind of swanky office buildings and just thinking what do you do, right? Still kind of a mystery at this point, but I had a concept of what's a doctor, what's a lawyer, what's a teacher, and I think there was, at least for me, sort of this spark of who are these people? What do they work on? What is this? And that sort of just percolated in the background as we were going off and doing, Dario was obviously getting a PhD and I was working in, global health, but there was always sort of this backdrop of these young people walking around sort of having these cool jobs that I think there was something in there that stuck with me.
I was actually entirely uninterested in the first tech boom in the 90s. It all seemed really boring to me. I was interested in being, inventing new theories of the universe, and I thought of AI as kind of in that bucket. But so I worked on neuroscience for a while, and then as I moved into AI, it kind of became increasingly interlinked with the tech world, and it became clear to me that if you wanted to actually make these issues of both scientific discovery and social responsibility real and bring them out into the world, the devil is in the details, and it would really come down to the details of the technology and how it's integrated into the economy, and that the only way you could really hope to influence that, or the best way you could hope to influence that, was actually by being involved in running one of these companies.
I feel like there's more to explore here, but we're running out of time, and I want to get to 3 questions, so we have to kind of do 2 rapid fire. Considering the extraordinary expense and resources that have to go into training and operating these large language models, do you worry that it won't be feasible anymore to keep showing these step improvements in the way that we have historically been seeing them these past few years?
Yeah, so I think we have quite a ways up to go, right? The current generation of models that we're seeing out there is still in the $100 million range. I think all of this can scale to the $100 billion range. At the end of that range, with some difficulty in terms of power and chip provision, but we're gonna get there in a few years. So that's a factor of 1,000 more, and then I think the algorithms are gonna get more efficient, and we're gonna see some things on top of post-training. At some point, we're going to run out, but I think there's lots of things stacked on top of things to keep making models.
Do you guys worry about the carbon footprint of these models?
So something that we have invested in from early on at Anthropic is actually doing carbon offsets. Of course, it's a complicated issue. There's no perfect answer, but it is something that is top of mind for us and that we invest in.
The FTC is examining the relationship that companies like Anthropic have with the big tech companies like Google and Amazon. Is there an argument here that these relationships forestall competition?
So, I mean, I can only speak for Anthropic, but I think one of the things about us is we have relationships with 2 different cloud providers. And so, I can't go into the details, but in many cases, having those 2 different partnerships makes it, not plausible that, that various things could be exclusive, right? And so, I think that independence and that choice is one thing that I think differentiates Anthropic from some of these other deals.
I mean, just to build on that, I know we're at time, but I really think, the sort of current state is that it is quite expensive to train these models, right? And so I expect we'll see similar structured deals, to come, but strongly agree with Dario. We're an independent company.
Okay, I'm gonna ask one quick question and we'll leave you. Just considering that you're saying that we're gonna continue to see the same pace of improvement, make the argument for us that we should be excited about this AI future instead of slightly fearful about it.
My honest answer is that you should be both at the same time. People have asked me, how excited or worried are you on a scale of 1 to 10? And I said, I'm 10 out of 10 excited, and I'm 10 out of 10 worried as well. And so we try to handle both of it. But let's actually, I'll just discuss the positives for like 20 or 30 seconds, which is I think of biomedical, right? I go back to my work as a neuroscientist and computational biologist, and I really look at diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's. We're getting to this range of diseases that are super biologically complicated, and that humans are running up against their limits of what they can understand, right? What can fit in one person's understanding. And I think the AI computational chemists, which we're already beginning to see the little bits of with work we're doing with companies like Pfizer, I think there's a lot of potential there, and that field could be very surprised by how fast things go and the real improvements in quality of life that come from it.
All right, well, Dario and Daniela Amodei, thank you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.